Well. Here we are. Another episode of the Planet Soccer Podcast. Welcome, everybody. I'm Reed Simpson, your co-host. That's Dylan, the Newcastle fan. God, you're like, what's an American fan base to compare you to? Yeah, Dylan's team has one good year, and he just loves throwing the logo in the face. Show him your beer. Even his freaking beer. I'm over here with a Modelo. He's Newcastle Brown Ale. Shoving it in my face. Today we're talking Hotspur. We're talking Tottenham Hotspur.
It's the Eddie Howe special.
The beer is, or this episode?
Both. We have a manager we love, so you can't relate.
For now.
We have a manager, so you can't relate.
Go. Yeah. All right, before this gets too off the rails, we're talking Tottenham Hotspur, the dumpster fire that is. There's never been a more poorly run, well-run sporting organization in the world. And what I mean by that is, on paper, people point to Tottenham's debt. Their debt's in the stadium. Like, they're a very well-run, financially a very well-run organization, to the detriment of... Yes, correct. To the detriment of the product on the field a lot of the times. And here we are again for the 2018, 2019, 2020, 21, 22, 23. For the fourth year in a row, Tottenham will finish the season with a different manager than the one they started with. That is unbelievable. Unbelievable. They've made Champions League, I think probably 2 out of those 4 years, maybe 3 out of those 4 years. So they haven't been terrible seasons by any means. Go ahead.
Do you have trophies?
No trophies. Yeah.
Neither do we, but I gotta throw it.
Have you gotten that joke out? You gotten that joke out? Are we good? We good?
We're done with the trophy joke.
Right, we got the
maybe
joke
one
out.
more time. One more time.
Okay. All right. I'll give you one trophy joke every 15 minutes.
I'm going to drag this thing out.
So here we go. Tottenham Hotspur. This is the international break at the time of recording. We're towards the end of the March international break. Tottenham Hotspur has just fired Antonio Conte, who took over 16 months ago as manager, had a very, very good 2022 and first half of 2023. Really not a terrible fall of 2023. Or spring, no. 2022 fall, decent. 2023 is when it's really started to go off the rails. Tottenham, like we said, is without a coach. Not only are they without a coach, they're now without a sporting director that can technically
those damn
operate.
Italians.
Fabio Paratici has had his Italian FA basically operations ban extended to all of the world. FIFA has extended it worldwide, which basically means he was involved in a fraud incident with Juventus, and the Italian FA has punished him, and they appealed to have those people that were involved in that punished worldwide. So whether they're in England, Spain, wherever now, he's unable to operate. He is the director of football for Tottenham. We also don't have a women's coach right now, recently fired a women's coach. Our owner is in the Bahamas, and our chairman, Mr. Daniel Levy, is in Asia on business. On top of all of that, pretty much half of our starting lineup and all of our bench depth is hurt right now. But alas, Tottenham sits in fourth place. I have an outline to this episode. It's right here. I've not followed it one bit yet. That's just
I think you hit on all of the segments in your intro, which is great.
Probably.
That's how I was taught to write a paper in high school.
Nice,
your
nice
outline is it's a nice intro. That was good. That was good.
So at the risk of going completely off the rails, let's go into what does all of this mean, knowing that one, Tottenham's still sitting in fourth. Newcastle does have, I think, one game in hand, which y'all are 2 points behind us? And a manager. Yeah, well, we have a manager technically.
2 games and a manager, I think, actually.
Okay, 2 games and a manager.
So yeah, and his starting
Nonetheless,
lineup.
yeah, nonetheless, it's not all storm clouds, although it feels like it could very well be. But there are some things that have happened recently that could potentially shine a light at the end of the tunnel. But I just know the way this club works. I know the chairman, and I just don't trust this organization to do the right thing. Um, Dylan, before I just do my whole spiel for 45 minutes, I'm gonna let you
Yeah,
say
I'm
a
just
few
here to drink
words.
beer. To be fair, like
What what do
this is
you?
your episode.
Well, I need a little bit of commentary so I can take a breath every once in a while. But as an outsider, you understand the way Tottenham works. You understand all the jokes, all that. You understand Daniel Levy. What is kind of your perspective on all of it, knowing where you have come from with the Mike Ashley tenure, all that? What are you kind of looking at this and thinking?
So two things. Conte was right. How he
Oh
handled
yes, we
it
have.
is,
Will you mention all that? I didn't even say like
yeah.
why did he get fired, essentially, among other
Well,
things.
he didn't get fired. They took a week to mutually
Mutually
agree
part ways. Yeah, whatever.
to part ways. Um, Conte was right. He had arguably the most inflammatory statement, North American, European, or otherwise, sports manager, head coach, whatever you want to call it, based on your preferred league. Most inflammatory statement I think I've ever heard from a head coach, if you will, for American terms, statement I've ever seen. It was damning, but extremely accurate. I know I joke and people joke with you all of the time about Tottenham ownership, organization, culture being the problem, but at the end of the day, it seems like it is. Like you've
It
had
is. Yeah.
numerous world class managers over the last 5 years, and it hasn't panned out. So at a certain point, it starts to look like it is a club problem. But all of that beside, like I think, honestly, not even all that beside, like that is your problem. And as a Newcastle fan, I know about ownership problem, but it's a different type of ownership problem. I argued this to my friends in the last week and a half. None of them Spurs fans, mainly Arsenal fans, to be fair. Argue this to them. I would rather have Mike Ashley as my owner, knowing a takeover was going to happen, than Daniel Levy. Because Daniel Levy is throwing money at a problem in an incorrect fashion, and it's putting the club in a position where a new manager with a transfer budget, if you have that with all of the external debt associated with the club aside, like it is a position that a new manager, I don't know if they can solve it. At least Mike Ashley was miserable with Newcastle, but at least it put them in a financial fair play position to go ahead and spend money and be wise about investment. And I don't know if Spurs are at that point right now. And if I were a Spurs fan, that would be my worry. Money has been spent, but it has been spent so poorly that you're in a position where you're a super club team, and you are, and Newcastle isn't. And I will always, not always, for the time being, admit that you are a bigger club, a bigger product, a bigger media outlet, a bigger financial impact club than Newcastle, but you are in a spot where it's been spent so poorly that I'm not comparing you to Everton in the sense of financial fair play, but you're in a position where you don't necessarily have the money that you should have at your disposal for this new manager. Money has been spent. Money has been spent poorly, in my opinion. Richarlison. Other opinions aside or not, that you're in a spot where it is going to be very tough for that next manager. There is plenty of talent on this side, but it's been utilized so poorly for arguably so long that it is going to be a very uphill battle to come out of this situation.
Yeah. So couple things, background just to address, like relating to what you said. You were referring to Conte's comments during a press conference after Tottenham drew Southampton, who's, if they're not the bottom, they're damn near the bottom of the Premier League. And that was surrendering 2 goals in the last 15 minutes, up 3-1. Just absolutely abysmal. He essentially came out and said, yeah, almost word for word. I'll try to remember to put it in. What are we at here? 10:22. Just write that note down. He essentially said, you can change the manager all you want. The club's not going to change. And he's very much correct. Daniel Levy's the chairman of Tottenham Hotspur. He has been in charge since Enoch took over majority share about 20 years ago now. The club has grown in stature on the world stage exponentially, as far as fan base and money in the bank goes, and kind of worldwide reputation. Stadium, obviously, if you're going to have a concert or any sort of event in London, you're going to have it at Tottenham Stadium. For better or worse, the fans in England will get all hoity-toity about that, and I understand it. Don't announce a Beyonce concert the day after you get knocked out of the FA Cup to a championship
match
side.
You should have won. Yeah.
Yeah.
On a match you chose to lose, arguably.
Yeah, you threw that game to, win your Champions League game that you then also failed to show up for. So Antonio Conte, he came out later and said that, hey, none of that was directed at the board, that was directed at the players, which bullshit on that. Like, yeah, you can't backtrack on that. It was directed at the board, and I appreciated what he said. As it should have been. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think with the money, the money being spent is being spent just without any really real due diligence, a la, hiring Paratici, knowing that this sort of issue could come up with his fraud situation in Italy, spending money on players that really, you maybe didn't do the right scouting on, maybe players that your coach didn't end up wanting, which Danjuma, yep. Which, hearing what Richarlison and Christian Romero and some other guys said about Conte, or not hearing what they said, but through sources hearing that they were going to give Tottenham an ultimatum, say, sell me if Conte's still there. I'm going to reserve a little bit of judgment on Richarlison because he got very irregular playing time, and we'll see what role he ends up playing. Maybe he'll end up getting 7 goals in the last, we have 10 games left, maybe 4 or 5 goals in the last 10 games. Who knows?
Hate him, but he could. He has that talent. Yeah.
Yep. Essentially, somebody did bring up a good point about Daniel Levy and saying that he has taken Tottenham to kind of a stature that they weren't at before. However, that's like financially, it's off the field, it's brand, it's not on the soccer field, which at the end of the day is what Tottenham Hotspur is. And that's where you get so much frustration. He's failed to secure naming rights for the stadium, which is going to pay off a lot of the debt. That hasn't happened. He's hired managers that have different styles that, you say Antonio Conte's successor is going to inherit a team with multiple wing backs, kind of, certain players that might not fit their style. And it just seems like they've gone from Pochettino to Nuno to Mourinho to Nuno to Conte, which the last 3 have had somewhat similar styles, but they've been searching in the bargain bin for these transfers, either searching in the bargain bin or they've drawn out the negotiations so far that teams like Sporting now are hesitant to even do business with us, or players like Pedro Porro or Jed Spence is probably the best example. He's like, do y'all even really want me because you took all summer to sign me? Then you sent me out on loan. He's doing fantastic in France. It's just, the Tottenham Supporters Trust, I think, sums it up best when they asked, we just want a direction. Like, come out and tell us what the direction is of this club. Like, you have a sporting director that can't operate. You have no manager, no women's manager. Where's the owner? Who knows? Where's the chairman? Doing business in Asia. It's just, what are we doing here? Like, this is way more of an entertainment company than it is a soccer club now, or a football club now. And I think that's probably the most frustrating thing, is it just doesn't feel like there's any attention being paid to the product on the field. Their biggest thing is make the Champions League, make the first round of the knockouts in the Champions League, secure that money, then let's dip.
And speaking to the product on the field, like as much as people hate on the history of Spurs, not winning trophies since 08 you got one, and then 90 whatever you got
91
one.
was the last FA Cup. Yep.
But like there's just a different brand of football being played that isn't Spurs. And like Man United, love it, hate it, or indifferent on it, there is a brand of football that club has always played, whether it's successful or not. And Spurs seems to get away from that with some of these managers. And I have questions that, like, does Levy, rightfully so, does Levy care about the tradition, the type of football that Spurs are known for, or does he care about the money? And it's like, we went through the same thing at Newcastle. It was like Newcastle deep down was a pretty, trophies aside, you can relate, like, aside, but like had some sort of history, some sort of like identity to the style of football that was played, and the style of club that was being built. And Mike Ashley tore that to the ground. And I think you're seeing a more heavily invested version of Mike Ashley right now at Spurs.
But it's all eyewash. It's investment.
Exactly. To bring back some old baseball terms, it is eyewash. It is all like, hey, this is for show. I want to look like I care about this club and this city and this fan base. And in that respect, it might be harder to differentiate compared to Newcastle, because Newcastle there was no eyewash. It was, I'm here to promote my brand. I'm here to promote Sports Direct. And that was what Newcastle was for 10 years. But like Levy, it's like this weird hybrid of, I want to act like I'm serious, but I'm not ready to act serious as a big six club. And like, as much as I give you crap about Spurs, you guys are still, again, a Super League team. Like, if the Super League were to have happened, you guys were there. Like, you guys are a legitimate powerhouse in English football, but your ownership just isn't capitalizing on that potential. It is more about we're this powerhouse, we're this, big six, let's just capitalize on the money, and less so about the football. And as a club who, again, trophies aside, has some storied history, it is a shame. Like, don't get me wrong, I love ripping on you about the lack of success at Spurs, but it's sad. Like, maybe it's only sad to me because of you, and less so because of, the actual club. Because if you're an Everton fan, I would be reveling in this more than you can imagine. But
we really aren't a hateable club. Like, we really
aren't. Well, there are hateable aspects, but as a historic club,
there always are on every team. Y'all have hateable players. Arsenal certainly has hateable players.
But as a club mindset, there isn't as much as hateable as an Everton, or, in my opinion, as a Liverpool. Like, there are redeemable qualities about Spurs, and the Levies seem to be capitalizing on that financially, but not capitalizing that on the field. And that's where, if I were a Spurs fan, it would be extremely frustrating.
Yeah, it just, the thing that it always comes back to within the Spurs Twitter sphere, Tottenham's Twitter sphere, is it just feels like we're more of a real estate and entertainment company than we are a soccer club or a football club. And
exactly,
that's like, if I had a thesis of, why Daniel Levy's management of the club has been the problem, it's that they're just, those priorities come so far before the product on the grass pitch. And, he cares about whenever there's a stage on the, in the middle of the grounds, more so than when there's a grass in the middle of it. So, well, unless it's NFL, then he cares about that. But that's another thing. He's buddies with Jerry Jones, and trying to get a NFL team to London. Yeah, there are a lot of similarities between Tottenham and the Cowboys. Not the least of which the '90s being the last time either franchise did anything.
You said it, not me.
Yeah. No, but in reality, it's not all terrible. It's really not. The sky is falling. The sky is falling, of course. And that's the way that I've kind of learned in this sport. That's the way it always is. When it's going a little bit bad, the sky is freaking falling. When it's going good, we've seen you throughout this year on the podcast. It's going great. You're on top of the world. I felt that way last May. We thrashed Arsenal, and then you
You're
guys
welcome.
thrashed them, and yeah, it was brilliant. Um, and then on top of that, they're looking to increase season ticket prices next year, which is just that has to be a joke. Like, that's comical, right? Come on. They're already the highest in England, second highest in England, maybe. It's one big clown show. And there are rumors that if Tottenham does sell, Daniel Levy isn't going to sell his portion, and he wants to stay on as chairman of the board. He's become an autocracy basically at Tottenham, a dictatorship, and he wants to hang on to those real estate holdings. He wants to develop that part of London, have his name stamped all over. He wants to gentrify the shit out of low income area of London that really loves Tottenham and embraces Tottenham. And it's just really frustrating to see. I couldn't imagine living over there, growing up on Tottenham, living and breathing it every day with my parents, going to games. Luckily, I'm an ocean away, and I can distance myself if I want to, because I don't have people every second of every day that are Arsenal fans or are Chelsea fans. I can separate myself from the noise if I want to. But if I was over there, I probably wouldn't be able to. Transitioning over to, go ahead, were you going to say something else?
It might be jumping a little bit ahead, but as far as that ownership standpoint, would you rather be a Chelsea that is overspending to the moon and seeing no results, or would you rather be a Tottenham that has these ownership problems but is still having more success on the field? Like, yes, you didn't qualify for the next round in Champions League, but overall, I think we would be remiss to say that, Chelsea has had a better season than Spurs. I think you could call it a toss up at this point because of where Chelsea is in the Premier League. So it's kind of that fine balance. Would you rather
Here's
that
the Before you
overspending
move on,
for
I just don't
would
want
you
to lose
rather
this
that
thought. I'm sorry, I don't want to lose this
yeah,
thought.
no, go ahead.
Write down 2240, because I have something profound to say. You know what Chelsea needs? Chelsea needs a Daniel Levy. You know what Tottenham needs? Tottenham needs a American sugar daddy, or they need what each other's problem is right now, and that's such an interesting aspect to me, because if you have an owner that's going to throw around money like Bowley is, he needs somebody like a Daniel Levy to say, hold on, let's think about this. Like, yes, let's go buy a player, but let's do it in certain ways, and let's strategize this and figure out, okay, really negotiate the price down, and if we can't get them for this, then just wait until the summer, because did they really need Mikhailo Mudryk for 80 mil? No, he's barely played. He's sitting on the bench for that money. Like, they need a Daniel Levy to tell them that, but Tottenham needs a sugar daddy owner to splash the cash and maybe step on
On an
Daniel
Enzo.
Levy's mouth and say, "Hey, you're not going to veto this. I'm writing the checks." Because at the end of the day, Daniel Levy isn't really writing the checks. It's not all his money. It's Enix money and whatever consortium actually owns the club. So I think that what Chelsea's problem is, Tottenham needs more of, and what Tottenham's problem is, Chelsea needs more of.
I don't want to jump too far ahead if you have a really sound
Transition.
layout for this episode, but you could argue swap managers even, and I would think you would both be more successful. I think a Conte right now at Chelsea would be, well, Conte's out the door, I understand, but I think a Conte at Chelsea would have more success than we are seeing with Graham Potter. And I think Graham Potter would have more success at Tottenham because of those ideologies and because of those decisions being made by those upper management positions. And I think, like you said, like if you just swapped some of the decision makers, you would see more success between the two. And I think it's kind of both of the downfalls of Chelsea. And not to, this is an episode more about Tottenham than it is Chelsea, but I think it is almost an opposite parallel, as much of an oxymoron as that is. Like I do think,
Those are big
like you're
words. Hold on,
saying,
I got to think about that for a second. Those are
I
big words.
I do think what you're saying is kind of valid. Like if you swapped owner for man and owners and managers, I think both teams would be more successful right now. And I think it's partially to do with the lack of success at Spurs, for lack of a better terms. I think Graham Potter kind of fits that more up and coming. I know you don't like being that club, but that's what you are. And Conte is more about win at all
No, screw it.
costs.
Like that's where I'm going next. Is I'm with you 100%. What Tottenham needs is
And
they need a project manager at this point. Like
right,
100%.
and we can dive into who the next manager should be at Tottenham. And I think it would be more of that Graham Potter Nagelsmann fit right now for Spurs. But I think a lot of what Spurs has put forward financially is going to demand somebody that is more of that Conte or Jose Mourinho. I know they're both former managers at this point, but more of that fit where we've spent this money. We have to have success right now. But based on where Spurs has been, I just don't see that being a realistic expectation at this point. You need more of that project manager, not quite to the extent of Newcastle with Eddie Howe, but like you need kind of more of that up and coming guy rather than let's splash cash on like the hottest name available on the market. And that's what
Eddie
you
Howe
guys have
hasn't had
done
that
for the
much of a
past 2 years.
project, though. He hasn't had that much of a project.
I mean, 7 of the 13 guys, I believe it was, that have played the most minutes this year were guys he inherited. But sure, we can.
I just think it'll take
time.
Tottenham more than 2 transfer windows to get right.
But
Does
why?
does that make sense?
But why? Because you've spent so much, you have so much talent. Like that's part of in my opinion, that's
Because
part
I
of the
think
problem with Spurs.
so.
Is like it's not new money that's being spent. Like it's money that's been there, and it's money that hasn't been wisely spent. And you've kind of put yourself behind the 8 ball in a sense. And that's what's frustrating. If I was a Spurs fan, is like the money's been there. The money's been there repeatedly, and it still isn't being capitalized on because of the type of manager you brought in. You're bringing in managers that are okay. We need to go win the Champions League this year. We're going to go get Conte because we have that sense of need.
Don't bring
of
in Conte if
success.
you want to win the Champions League. Don't bring in Conte.
but
no,
but like at the time that
saying.
was the thought of that hire.
Here's kind of the whole side that we haven't really talked about is you've got players like Davinson Sanchez, Eric Dyer, Harry Winks before this past window. They've been around through all these managers, but nothing's changed. So at a certain point, you have to look. I mean, even the Harry Kanes and the Sonnies of the world, like these world class players, you look at them and you think. I'm not saying necessarily Harry Kane's like a detriment, but sometimes it's just time to like start anew, start over.
I am.
I don't think Harry Kane is the reason Tottenham hasn't won a trophy in the last however many years. But he's become stale that
he's become so Spurs, and I'm not saying that in a mean way.
No,
but like, no,
you're right. You're right.
Spurs
the mindset
is so ingrained in him. And like I hate
it's
to
a sort of elevated yips. If you think of the yips,
yeah,
it's a sort of elevated version of the yips. I think it's what Harry Kane has when it comes to winning trophies. And I don't know. I mean,
we've seen it on the international stage with him. Like my purpose on this episode is not to just rip Spurs, but like it has become a culture of some of the most elite footballers or football minds in the world, which Conte is, Pochettino is, Jose Mourinho is. Like you have had some of the best football minds in the world. You've had some of the best footballers in the world in Kane, who I'm ready to argue is the best striker in the history of the Premier League, sans, Holland if he keeps it up. But like he's arguably the best striker in the history of the Premier League. You've had all of these pieces. It's just not winning. And I think that's where it comes down to a culture at Spurs. And again,
that's what Conte said.
Of this episode for me is like, and that's where I'm like all in on what Conte said is It
Yeah.
isn't the manager. It isn't the players. It's the culture around the organization right now. And
But those
we've
players
seen
have
that time.
become, and that
Exactly.
culture has become ingrained in these stale players that I feel like you need to move on from, which, we're at 30 minutes now. I kind of want to just end this one and then do like a part 2 on what's next. If you're cool with that, I don't think there's like I don't want this to go an hour. Tottenham's in trouble from a culture standpoint, and I think that it's going to end up taking a true project, a 3-4 year project. Maybe don't tear it all down to where you're like relegation danger zone, but you need to
Well,
sacrifice Europe
yeah.
a couple of years to figure it out. And you
You're
need to get
not.
a
You're
manager
not.
in here that you, the fans, everybody's like, they're getting 3 years. I don't give a damn. They're getting 3 years because we need continuity. And so you guys check out part. Go ahead.
Before we end it, I'll
Yep.
say this and clip this, please. If Harry Kane leaves Spurs and goes to, no offense, a winning club like United or Bayern, which are the two most reasonable moves for him at this point, I think England can win the next World Cup. I legitimately think there's just that
Mindset
that
change.
Spurs mindset, Spurs mentality that has been ingrained in him. And kudos to him for sticking to it so long. But I think he needs to leave, and I think Spurs needs him to leave. There's no reason Spurs can't make a Champions League semifinal 5 years from now. No reason. But it's not with Harry Kane. And there's no reason that the next World Cup, Harry Kane can't get this England team into the semifinals. But I just don't think they can do it together. It's toxic right now at
Yeah.
Spurs, and I think all parts need to kind of part ways with each other to see more success on both fronts.
I think most level-headed Spurs fans would agree with that. Most, people
It
who are looking
hurts.
at it
I'm
from,
sure it's not fun. Like just saying, "Hey, we need the best striker in Premier League history to
I
leave
mean,
us
it
to be
happens,
better."
it's like,
But like,
it feels a lot like, sans the winning. It feels a lot like the Brady breakup with the Patriots. Like it's like, it just needs to happen whether, it's kind of opposite, like, cause Brady wanted to prove himself otherwise, but Kane needs
well,
to go prove.
yo, as a Spurs fan, you better not hope it's anything like that because the Patriots look bad without him, and Brady looks great without the
Patriots don't look
Patriots. So,
bad. They had an off year, but they were borderline. They almost made the playoffs this year, so that's
so
fine.
almost make the League
Almost
Cup
make Europe.
semifinals.
I truly believe it's going to take some tearing down. Like, we're talking 10th place in the Premier League to build back
I
up.
agree.
And I'm just
It's
used to that
sad,
in American sports. I'm used to that, so I just, I've seen the Mavericks do it.
but from a European's perspective, it's hard,
It's
especially
the
as a Spurs
end of the
fan. Like
world. Yeah.
it because if you are a Spurs fan, you've seen so many years of European football saying we need 3 or 4 years of not even Conference League to rebuild this. It's a lot different of a mindset to rebuild in European football than it is American football. But I do kind of think that's where Spurs are at.
We appreciate you guys listening. Leave your thoughts. People always have thoughts about Tottenham. They're usually pretty negative, but go ahead and leave them down below. And check out part 2. We're going to get that up along with this one. We're going to talk about what's next for Tottenham, what needs to happen, what should happen, but probably won't happen. So you guys check that out, and we will talk to y'all over there.